This week on the podcast is all about helping you upgrade your bucket list. That's our theme. We've got 3 destination episodes coming your way, and we're kicking it off with none other than Allyson Johnson, the senior editor of National Geographic. After a decade of releasing its best of the world lists, National Geographic has now put all of their top trips from those lists, an ultimate compilation, if you will, into this new book called Best of the World, 1,000 Destinations of a Lifetime. And we're going to break it down for you today. You're going to get some new destination recommendations. You're going to hear about some of those top spots to go have adventures, to experience nature, to just get away and enjoy yourself and soak in some culture. Plus, of course, I had the senior editor of National Geographic, so I had to ask her some tips on editing, self-editing as a writer, the craft of writing. I asked her how we can pitch our books to National Geographic. She answers that question and so much more. It's all coming at you right now in this episode. Kicking it off here, Upgrade Your Bucket List Week on the Zero to Travel podcast. Thanks for listening. Welcome, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. And what is the question you ask yourself the most as a traveler? I can guess one of the top ones. Where am I going next? Where am I going to go next? Isn't that the perennial question we always ask ourselves? And perhaps this week you'll get some answers as we do our part to help you decide on some of those places you want to visit in the next few years. As a traveler, obviously destinations are constantly evolving, and it's good to keep your pulse on what's happening around the world, where you might want to consider visiting. We have limited resources, a lot of us, for travel, so we got to pick and choose wisely. And this week is all about helping you reassess your bucket list, perhaps add some new destinations to it. I don't know if you like the term bucket list or not, whatever you want to call it, live list. You get the idea. It's the places you're going to want to go and visit here in the near future. And I will, on the back end of this interview with Allyson, share with you a handful. I mean, I didn't go crazy. I have the Best of the World book here, and I didn't want to put together a list of 100 places, although I could have, but I did put together 5 destinations that I've been to that are in the book that were not covered in the interview that I wanted to just throw out there as personal recommendations, and a few that I've added to my bucket list myself. So if you want to hear that, you can stick around after my conversation with Allyson. For now, I do want to remind you to tune in, subscribe to the show, or follow it wherever you're listening, because we have more destination-themed episodes coming up this week. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, which is free, ZeroToTravel.com/newsletter. All right, the housekeeping is done. Let's move into my conversation with Allyson Johnson, senior editor of National Geographic. And I will see you on the other side, my friend. Thanks for listening.
Senhores passageiros, dentro de momentos, vendas novas. Ao desembarcar, tenha a intenção de grau e a distância entre a porta e a plataforma. Por favor, não se esqueça da sua bagagem nem objetos pessoais. Next stop, vendas novas.
I'm so fortunate to have Allyson Johnson here, the senior editor at National Geographic. And with her team, she's put together this incredible book we're going to talk about today, Best of the World, 1,000 Destinations of a Lifetime. Allyson, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We were just talking. I know you have a bunch of interviews coming up today, and we've got the first one of the day. So I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, but we're excited to have you here. I mean, when I woke up today, I was thinking, okay, yeah, I've been doing this podcast for over 10 years, but still, I get to get on the call with you, a senior editor for National Geographic, and talk about destinations around the world that are incredible. Like, pinch me.
Right.
This is awesome. I mean, this is our job. Now, I know like jobs entail a lot of different things and stresses, but still pretty incredible.
Yeah, I would say I'm one of the lucky people too that every day I'm like, oh, I get to do this for a living.
Yeah.
It's, jobs are jobs, but I feel like I hit the jackpot working at National Geographic.
Well, it's kind of funny because you had an interesting journey because I know, well, you went to college in Maryland, right? What
Yeah.
attracted you to journalism?
I was always into journalism. From a very young age, I loved to read. I loved to write. I actually had a really wonderful high school teacher in my creative writing course who sat down with me for a while when I was a junior and talked about the paths I could take with writing because I was so invested in it. And, it was become an English teacher, try your hand at being a writer and writing a book, or, journalism was always an option, or communications. And journalism was just what appealed to me the most. I think, in my younger days, I had fantasies of like being the next Woodward and Bernstein. I was always drawn to those stories of like amazing journalism that really changed the course of the world. And then when I got into journalism and I did a bunch of internships, one of them was University of Maryland has a great program called Capital News Service, which is actually a live news wire like the AP. It serves 70 newspapers and websites across Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And I actually worked for them for a semester. And I was doing that kind of journalism, that kind of real hard-hitting journalism. And I realized the stories I was drawn to were actually the stories about beautiful humanity, about, features, about great people, great places, and not those hard gotcha journalism moments of uncovering something, which is very necessary in the world. It just wasn't what drew me into journalism. And so I really loved looking at the world through the diversity of people in there and finding those really exciting stories. And that's really what solidified me wanting to stick with journalism, but kind of change the course of thinking about like newspaper journalism to magazines and now books in that regard.
In terms of creativity, what do you enjoy about the craft of writing? Do you spend time writing personally, journaling, and other projects that are not associated with what you do professionally, or?
Yeah, I do. I journal a lot. Most of my job at National Geographic is more editing than writing, but I still write a lot for myself. And what I really love is, one, it's a way to hold memories. I think, we all are attached to our phones and we take pictures everywhere we go. But when you write and record, it really solidifies that memory with you. It really, you think about the feelings you had in that moment, what it meant to you. You describe places in really finite detail. And I think that's really special and a different way of creating memories than just the picture that you took. And I also love the idea, and this is really core to National Geographic too, of storytelling. And how do you convey that story so someone else can place themselves there, even if they'll never go to that place or have that experience, they can be in there with you. And I think that's the creative side of it, is figuring out beautiful storytelling that moves people, that brings them to a place or makes them feel like they met the person you're talking about. And storytelling is really key to the creativity and what I love to do when I write, and what I love about really good writers as well, is that they are great storytellers. And you forget where you are when you're immersed in those stories and you're where they want you to be in that writing.
Yeah. I mean, there's such an art to both sides of it, right? Editing or writing as a craft. A lot of it's curation of ideas, particularly with a book like this, of course. But I mean, you're being exposed to, I know I read on, I think LinkedIn, you're publishing about 12 to 15 books a year. That sounds insane to me, like an insane amount of work. But at the same time, you're also being exposed to a couple of things. You're being exposed to so much incredible writing and creativity, but also the actual knowledge that lies within the books that you're creating. I'm just wondering, just through that process of putting books together, what are some of the big lessons that you've learned personally?
Oh, that is a great question. One of the biggest things I've learned is there's no end to learning. I really feel that since I've started at National Geographic, which I just hit 9 years at National Geographic, I learn something new every day at my job. And I think that's a very rare thing to have at your job. But because I'm immersed in 15 books a day, which I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly researching, I learn something new about the world every single day. And I think that's a beautiful lesson in that there is so much to see, so much to learn about. And so through my writers that I work with, I've met a lot of people from around the world. I've learned about different experiences, different cultures, and just how diverse our world is, and not just the biodiversity that you expect from National Geographic. I've learned so much about our planet and the wildlife that lives there, but also the people and cultures around the world. And I think it's really a blessing for me that every day from my desk, I get to read about different cultures around the world and learn something new, whether it's a new tradition that they practice that I've never heard about before, or a new food or something. But there's so much beauty around the world that I get to experience through our National Geographic writers that are out there traveling and sending these stories back to us. And I think that's really special that I can see all of that, even if I never get a chance to go to some of these places. We have a National Geographic photographer, Evgenia, who takes pictures of places that you probably will never get to in your lifetime. They're places that don't appear on Google Maps. So, she grew up in Siberia. She goes out to the ends of Siberia, and there's beautiful storytelling in that. And I think that's amazing that there are people out there finding these stories and bringing them to someone like me who is sitting behind my computer. And yes, I do travel, but probably it's too hard for me to get to that part of the world. But she's showing me these beautiful stories and these people who've dedicated their lives to things like watching astronomy from a lighthouse in Siberia, or, monitoring ocean waves. And I think that's really special to see all of that. And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned is there's no end to learning and the diversity you can see around you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I always admire those people that you read about that dedicate their life, like you mentioned, to one specific thing, because that's so opposite of my life. It's just kind of fascinating to me. But it takes those people to like compound generationally to make progress on those specific sciences. It's really incredible. I agree. I think being exposed to the beauty of the world on a daily basis and just kind of remembering, I'm just speaking for myself here, I feel like that's really tied to gratitude with me, right? Just kind of like, it's easy when you're busy in your daily life to not sleepwalk through life, but you just, you're kind of just blind to all the incredible things around you. Like, we were at the library yesterday with my kids, and we were looking at this insect book that had super zoomed in pictures of insects where you saw their faces and like the fly tube coming out, and it's just like, wow. It's just
that exists. Yeah.
That exists. That's like, that was in my house. That was a housefly in my house, just last week that we named, by the way. We named him, what was his name? Herbert or something. I don't know. We had to peacefully get him back outside to the outdoors. But yeah, that part of the job, what a gift, right?
It is. It's a gift. And I always say that travel is the greatest lesson you can teach someone, because it teaches you empathy, it teaches you gratitude, it teaches you all of those things in one. And if you can't get to a place, being able to do what I do or pick up the books and read what we're creating, it allows you to see that life in those insects and those trees and the wildlife in the oceans. And I think that's really special. And it is a gift to be able to see all of that and experience that.
Do you have a morning or daily practice of some kind, or ritual or anything?
I wish I did. Right now, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, so my mornings are get everyone up and ready for the day.
Yes, I feel you on that, because I have a 5 and 7-year-old. So
okay, you're right there with me.
Well, not right there. I'm a little past that, but I understand what you're going through. It's a crazy time. Well, I mean, for you, how has travel changed since you had kids?
I haven't been able to travel as often as I used to. Travel has to be very thought out and planned in advance, because if we go with the kids, it has to be something, very that I feel like comfortable that they can handle, they can do. I am one of those travelers who is go, go, go. I don't like to stop and sit. I want to do everything, see everything. So when we travel with the kids, I have to remember, they need breaks. They can't go all day. They have nap times. They will fall apart. And so it has made me, in that regard, a looser traveler. I don't, when we travel as a family, I don't sit there and plan every minute of our itinerary out. It's, here are the things I would love for us to do. If we get to them, great. If we don't, let's try to hit 3 of them at least and have a little more of that flexibility. But then when I travel for myself or with my husband, without the kids, I'm still that itinerary travel that wants to hit everything, but it's much more intentional travel. I would say that, I know I don't have as long in a place, or, this was a really big bucket list for me to get to. And I had to make all these arrangements to leave the kids with my parents or my husband's parents. So making the most out of that time as well to have that alone time, but also see what I want to see while I'm there. And I don't have to worry about nap times and snacks and all the other things that come with traveling as a parent.
Just packing it in. Yeah. I mean, when you said 3 things, I was impressed. I was like, more like 1 thing, maybe a half a thing if you're lucky.
Yeah, I would say 3 is a little outside, but I try to be optimistic when I go with the kids. It depends on the day.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you learn so much from that experience, but also, yeah, I think one of the big lessons for me traveling with kids was just letting go of the things that I knew I couldn't, okay, it is what it is, as they say.
Yes. And not getting upset that something didn't go the way you thought it would, or like, hey, they didn't like that experience I thought they would love, right. and just kind of being more free about it.
Yeah. You can only control so much. I think it's
can't plan a lot.
You used to work as the lifestyle editor at Every Day with Rachel Ray magazine, which sounds totally different and completely, well, not totally different. I mean, you're still in editing and stuff like that, but I feel like every job you do has value. And even though you might not see it on the surface, when you dig in, you start to see how a career path influences you today. Like there's value in everything you do. And I was just curious, from your past experience, writing about like wedding planning or things like that, how does that stuff feed into what you do at National Geographic now?
Yeah. So I think, at Rachel Ray, it was where I honed in how to edit, how to be a good editor. And even though the topics were very different, one, I was doing a lot of writing at Rachel Ray. I did a lot of the holiday gift guides, the product reviews. And then I started going into more of the food space and doing some of the recipes and the DIY and like the party planning stories. And that's where I really honed both my editing style and also learned from a bunch of editors what makes a good editor. I was watching how magazine editors work. And one of the greatest lessons I learned there was, you would think we work for Rachel Ray magazine, everything should be in Rachel Ray's voice. And there were pieces that were in Rachel Ray's voice. So there was the side of learning to make one voice out of a story. And then there was the side of letting writers' voices shine. And I do think there are editors out in the world who edit the way they want, no matter what. And I always try to respect the writer that brings their piece to me and make sure their voice is still present in the story. And so that was a really great opportunity of finding that balance. When should it be Rachel Ray's voice? When should it be the magazine's voice? When should it be the individual writer's voice? And figuring that out in the editing process. So that was one of the greatest lessons that I learned there, was really how to be an editor, how to edit properly. But then that's also where I started getting my toes in the sand with travel writing and travel editing, because Rachel Ray is a big traveler, and there was always a travel section in the magazine. And one of my colleagues at Rachel Ray, Abby Kozolczyk, was our travel editor, and she kind of took me under her wing, and she started giving me some assignments in the travel space. She started having me edit some smaller pieces on travel, and it really opened my eyes to this world of travel writing and editing that I kind of wasn't aware of before Rachel Ray magazine. And so that led to where I am today, because without that initial entry point into travel writing, I wouldn't be here now. But also, being able to edit across the span of travel, DIY, recipes, food. When I started at National Geographic, I didn't immediately become the travel editor. I wasn't immediately given the travel books to work on. I worked on photography books. I worked on science books. I worked on space. I worked on health and wellness. And so I had already done a bunch of those topics within the magazine world. Because the nature of magazines, they all cover so many things within one single issue. So it allowed me that diversity to come in to National Geographic, to try my hand at all the different types of books that we publish, and then figure out what stuck with me the most and where I felt that I could be the strongest editor. So it was really, it all led, I was lucky that everything kind of led to each other, but that experience really opened a lot of doors for me, and which was fantastic and a great learning experience too.
Congrats. I noticed in the book, we're going to get into the book and some of the destinations, of course. This is a travel podcast after all. Well, I've been looking at this every day and loving it. And it's a bit of a compilation. And, when you mentioned maintaining the original writer's voice, I was thinking about, I can't remember which section it was or which country I was reading about, but there was a writer in there that, he had just a unique way of expressing himself, a bit of humor and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, this is not, there is some, there's the humanity behind each sort of featured destination and how it's covered. And I think that's one of the things that made the book really cool. Before we talk about some of the curated decade of your best of the world list, which is pretty incredible in and of itself, I did have one more editing question because, we all on some level have to self-edit, right? When it comes to, let's say, writing emails or a lot of creative projects. Like, even if you don't think you're doing a lot of writing, if you pay attention, at some point you're writing something, even if it's as simple as an email, and you have to make choices and edits. And now you're looking at your own work critically. And that's a bit different than looking at somebody else's work, I would imagine. I don't know, maybe not for you because you do this at such a high professional level. Maybe you're able to disconnect. But I was just curious, what are your thoughts on self-editing as a writer?
Yeah, it's always tricky to self-edit. I think we can all be our own worst critics. And so you have to come at yourself with grace, the same grace you would give someone else when you're editing them. What I always encourage people to think about is, how do you get to the point the fastest? You don't need to be this flowery, like, here's a door, but I'm going to walk all the way around it to get you to that door. So when I think about self-editing, I make my point clearly is the thing that I want to get at the most. And that's everything from writing to an email, there's all those memes out there about workplace emails that you say 10 sentences just to get to hey, you missed the email I sent you. I never got you a reply, so thinking in that regard of the most direct route in the most evocative way is kind of how I self-edit myself. So I want to be direct. I don't want to, I don't need to paint flowery words just for the sake of having flowery words in there. Every word has a purpose. And that's what I think about when I self-edit. Every word has a purpose is the biggest point that I can drive home. And we all are, like I said, our own worst critics. But I also think you have to have tough skin when you're, whether you're editing yourself or being edited. I've been edited 100 times over my life, and it hurts sometimes. You think you wrote the best sentence in the world, and then someone's like, what is this? And that it's hard to hear. But, you have to think about how other people take in information, how other people interpret information, and think that way, and have tough skin about that it's not personal. It's just someone trying to craft something to be the best version of itself is kind of how I think of editing. And in that regard, you really can't take anything personally, but in the same sense, editing and anything creative is subjective. So if you really believe something was the way it should be, have that conversation, have that dialogue about, whether it's with yourself and you're sitting there debating something or with another person, figure out why that edit was made, why you're debating how something was written, and think in that sense. And it's not just, I don't like this, but why didn't you like it? Or why do you want to change it? Or why do you love the way that this was written? And kind of having that either internal dialogue or external dialogue.
Is your job part psychologist in that way?
Part psychologist, yeah.
But sincerely,
there's a lot of conversations.
Yeah, because you have to be the one to take out that turn of phrase that somebody thought was great or whatever the case is. And now you are face to face or internet face to internet face, whatever the case is.
Right, exactly.
What have you done to my piece, Allyson?
Right. Exactly. And there have been moments that have been really tricky, but always coming at it with respect for the writer and the gratitude that they put their time and effort in, and being willing to have that conversation of, I'm not just changing this for the sake of changing it. Here's why. I'm not just being a jerk. I really want you to put your best foot forward, and that it's hard, and it can have some tough conversations, but in the end, we always get there, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Those conversations around creative elements, if somebody's really wholeheartedly believing in a specific creative choice, and I'm just kind of putting my feet in your shoes for a second here and kind of thinking, well, that's tricky. Like you said, you got to have the tough conversation, but that's why they pay the big bucks, I guess. I don't know. Well, I have been loving this book. Honestly, I have been looking at it every day, and I got my kids over my shoulder looking at it and stuff like that, which is another cool part of this. I don't really know where to start. I mean, how long did it take to pull this whole thing together? Did you do it in the span of a year, or was it? Not really, because it's a compilation of sorts, but yeah, just give us your overview.
It actually was, I want to say almost 3 years in the making, because we started this and then the pandemic happened, and we put it on pause for a little bit to see how things shook out. So then we really kicked things into gear. It took about 1.5 years in total. So Best of the World is a franchise that National Geographic has published since 2012. They have put out every year since 2012 a best of list, which is, here are the destinations that are worth your time in the upcoming year to go to. But we couldn't just take those lists and plop them into a book, because it's been 10 years. A lot has changed, not just because of the pandemic, but just because of time. So what we did was we took, from when it was in National Geographic Traveler, we took all the old issues of Best of the World, and then we took all the digital pieces, and we combed through every entry from those 10 years. We re-fact checked them. So we had multiple fact checkers go back through and make sure, are these hotels open? Are these areas still permitted for tourism? But then not just, are they there? Do they exist? But are they still considered best of the world? So we had our whole network of National Geographic travel writers, which is a wonderful global network, kind of weigh in and say, yeah, this still is worthy of best of the world. Nah, that kind of has fallen off a little bit. Maybe don't include it in the book. Some of the things we couldn't include because they were really timely. They were like, this is the best destination for 2021 because there's going to be a festival there this year that's never going to come back. So it was really finding that balance, but it took a long time just to get to what destinations are we going to include, because we had to do all that research and re-vetting to get there. Even though it was curation, it had a lot of looking back and looking into these places and kind of rewriting if necessary to make sure that they really still were best of the world destinations to include.
Yeah. It's another very subjective thing, of course. I mean, you have certain points you can make, but then you have to, essentially, it might come down to a feeling in some ways too, of a place and where it is and where it may be going. And so much is tied to it. Okay. Massive project, obviously. What was the most stressful thing about putting this book together, and what was the most fun thing?
I would say the most stressful thing was we were doing it in a time where the travel landscape was constantly shifting after it was post-pandemic. So things were reopening, reshaping. So the most stressful thing was making sure we got everything right, that we were future forward thinking and what will this look like, because we put our books to, they go out to the printer about 9 months, or they're wrapped up about 9 months before they actually hit bookshelves. So you have to think future forward. Will this still be in a year from now, in 5 years from now, when someone has this on their coffee table and opens it up to plan a destination they want to go to? So thinking future forward in a landscape that was shifting constantly was really tricky and stressful for us. I think we were really trying to put our finger on the pulse of like tried and true destinations through the National Geographic lens of, is it a cultural experience that's worthwhile? Is it a historical experience that's worthwhile? Eco-friendly tourism, sustainability was front of mind. Isn't it an adventure of a lifetime? So that helped us kind of put a framework around this to make sure we were truly including the best of the world and ones that would be there for years and years and years to come. The most fun part about it was adding to my own bucket list. And I think that happens with every travel book I work on. You just sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to get myself to this place as soon as possible. And that comes to life with the writing. It also comes to life when I start seeing the layouts and the beautiful photography. And sometimes, just the cover of the book, when I saw it, I was like, where is that cover? I'm going to get on a plane and go there as soon as humanly possible. And so that's always the most fun part for me, is not just seeing the places I've been to and being like, yeah, that deserves to be in here, but actually having inspiration of new places that I want to go to, where I want to get to because of these books.
Okay. On that note, I am going to ask you your top 3 from the book that you have personal experience with. Again, we know it's subjective. It's just a fun exercise. You got a ton of destinations in here, but 1,000 destinations of a lifetime. So we're talking about a small amount here. But yeah, just curious, when some came up that you had been to and they just grabbed you like, oh yeah, this is definitely going in. What were a few of those?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorites that actually I hadn't gone to while we were working on the book, but I got there this summer. I actually went at the end of June, was Tanzania. I went on my first safari this summer, and Tanzania was in the book. And I have talked to a number of National Geographic travel writers that if you hit Tanzania in Serengeti National Park around the Great Migration, there's no safari experience like it. And I was lucky enough to be able to go this summer, and I cried happy tears multiple times on this trip. It was just one of the most moving places I've ever been. The wildlife was spectacular. We got there kind of at the beginning of the Great Migration, so we didn't see massive herds, but we saw a ton of herds of animals. We saw all of the African Big Five, saw lions, cheetahs, leopards, rhinos, Cape buffalo, tons of elephants and zebras. Every safari drive we did safari for 4 nights. We did 2 drives a day. Every day was different. We saw something new. We saw the Serengeti itself was beautiful. We visited Maasai village, which was spectacular. So it was just one of the most moving trips I've had of my life so far. And that just from seeing wildlife in its natural habitat was so incredible. And then the people of Tanzania were so warm and welcoming, and getting to know a lot of the locals there who worked at the lodge that we stayed at. It was really wonderful to see. And I remember sitting there and being like, I'm glad we put that in best of the world because it fits here perfectly. And, I don't have a ton of African safaris to compare it to. That was my first one, but it was truly the trip of a lifetime. And so that was definitely a highlight for me that I think is very worthy of being in this book.
Did your kids come with you on that trip?
They did not come with me on the trip. Though I will say we were with a bunch of other people at our lodge, and there were families there who had kids as young as 2. I do not have the type of kids that would sit happily in a safari jeep for 4 hours on end. So we left them back. But there were kids that could do it, but my kids are not those type of kids.
That's the ages, at least, right
yes.
now. But yeah, I totally get that. Where did the extra emotion come from? Like I know personally, I feel like there's certain things in the world that you see that are endangered or, lifestyles or whatever, animals. I feel like I look at my kids now and I'm like, well, they're going to inherit this world, and where's this world going? And that really brings an extra level of emotion to my travels. I don't know if any of that was the same with you coming from that.
I would say you nailed it on the head with that. It was seeing, seeing these endangered species in their wildlife, and they're just them placed in this beautiful Serengeti, and thinking, I hope these animals survive so my kids can see them. And, I remember when we were getting ready for the trip, someone said to me, well, I did the safari ride at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge. And, it's probably going to be very similar to that. And it's like, that's a great way to see animals if you're not going to be able to go on safari. I'm not going to put that down, because you are going to see, lions pretty close and all that. But this was so different to see them in their natural habitat. One night we came across a lioness who had 3-week-old cubs with her. And just to see that natural interaction that you see it on TV, you've seen it in all the nature documentaries, but to see it in real life, that these cubs, first of all, were terrified of the Jeep as we approached and just scurried to their mom. And then once the mom kind of calmed them down, they were playing and they're tussling with each other and they're climbing on their mom and all that. And just seeing that natural behavior in this natural environment. They're not at a zoo. They're not in an enclosed environment. They're just living their life. And it was incredibly beautiful and powerful. And, we always say at National Geographic, the only way people are moved to help make change is by experiencing things for themselves. And I kind of had that understanding of that sentiment, that, if everyone in the world could go out on a safari ride and see these animals in their natural environment, in their natural behaviors, there would probably be more of a move to protect them. There would be more of a movement to help save them, because they're beautiful, they're majestic, and they're full of personality. I mean, the elephant herds, every elephant was so different. We had one elephant who played peekaboo with us for half an hour. He would just hide behind a tree and then pop out and fluff his ears. And just seeing that personality, it's we were laughing and he was playing with us. And it's just incredible to see kind of their personalities in this wildlife come out. And I think that that moved me incredibly. And to think that anyone would do these animals harm was really hard to process too.
Yeah. What an unforgettable moment. By the way, no offense to your friend, but that's probably if there was a top 10 things not to say to the senior editor of National Geographic, it's that you can have this same experience at a theme park. We can put that on a t-shirt. We can get they can start rolling in here. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard a few other ones, so maybe we can put those down later.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah. I think for me, I have never been on safari as well. And now hearing you describe it is just making it even a stronger urge. And I really want to do that with my kids and have them experience that myself. So that's magic. Yeah. What were a couple of the other destinations?
One that I insisted on making the book is Costa Rica. And I actually think it's, if you're from the United States and you've never traveled internationally, it's probably one of the best starter international trips that you can take, for sure. It's easy to get to. It's, I think people feel very welcome when they go to Costa Rica. There's not as big of a language barrier. Costa Rica was one of my favorite trips I've ever taken, just because of the breadth of experiences you can have there. So when I went, we stayed near Arenal volcano, which was just incredible in itself to see. We zip lined through the jungle canopies, including, over this river gorge that I actually got to zip line upside down across, which was just adrenaline rushing to the extreme. We went ATV riding, we went snorkeling and scuba diving. And then there's just a beautiful way of life in Costa Rica. Their motto is Pura Vida. So they're all about living life to the fullest. The food is amazing. And so that was a destination that I was like, if this hasn't been featured in Best of the World, we're adding it, because it just has to be in there. Everyone should have a chance to get to Costa Rica and experience the adventure, the biodiversity, the food, the people of Costa Rica. It's just one of my favorite trips of all time that I've ever taken.
Love it. You mentioned Pura Vida, that philosophy, that cultural kind of, it's almost like pure life, I guess is a direct translation, something like that. Just kind of enjoy life in a way. Yeah, I'm just using that as a specific example because you live in the DC area, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm from outside of Philadelphia originally. I live in Norway now, but I know that the East Coast is generally kind of like that fast-paced sort of. And when I get back, I feel like there's anxiety floating through the air in some ways. In that, yeah. I'm just curious for you as a traveler when you come back from a trip like that, where you've spent a bit of a time like embracing some kind of cultural idea, like Pura Vida. I'm using that as a specific example. And then you come back home. How much of that do you want to carry with you and kind of do your daily life? How much are you able to? I always think that's a trick that if you can pull it off as a traveler, if you can kind of cherry pick these little cultural philosophies and things that can just help you live your best life, essentially. It's always magic, but it's hard to do when you get back into your home environment.
Yeah, it's hard when you're in your real life to be like, hey, I'm going to take things easy, breathe, slow. You say my deadline's that time. No, Pura Vida.
Right. I got this. Yeah, it's all good. I'm going to go surfing.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's very tricky. I'm outside of DC right now. I actually lived in New York for a number of years. And I remember even, DC is very fast paced too, but even the difference between DC and New York, I remember one time taking the train back because I grew up in DC. So I'd come home to visit my family and take the train back up to New York. And like, I could feel my blood start pumping differently. Like the second we hit New York, like I walked faster. I felt that energy level. Like it's like full body consumption. And so I do try when we travel and have experiences like in Costa Rica. Obviously I can't slow down everything. I can't, make deadlines disappear, have a different work pace. But I do try to like take what I've learned and adopt it in ways I can. Like, so Pura Vida to me, when I think about that, it's pure life, but I also think live life to the fullest. So like trying not to miss moments, being present when I can, with my kids, with my family, making the most out of weekends when we're not tied to busy work and school schedules. So I try to take those little lessons and intersperse them where I can, but within the reality of our real day-to-day life that we do have work pressures and school pressures on us. And unfortunately, we can't all just slow down and stop everything. But I do try to like sometimes take reminders. And obviously, like right when I get back from a trip, I'm much better at doing that. And then when it's been like a few months, I've gotten back into my real life pace. But I do, when I do feel overwhelmed or stressed with the pace of life, sometimes I do think of, if I lived in such and such a place, I wouldn't be like this. And then I try to say, well, I could adopt X, Y, and Z into my life instead of just saying, I have to uproot my life to go change the pace that I'm living at.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot of value in just being exposed to those ideas or cultural philosophies or whatever you want to call them. And even living them, even if it's for a short period of time, right? I feel like that some of it gets in there, right? I say that with my kid when I'm teaching my kids lesson. You don't think they're going to remember this trip when they're 3 or whatever, but it all goes in there.
It does. And it sticks with you and it comes out in ways you don't expect. But I think you're absorbing it. And even if you just got that week of respite and experience a different way of life, it sticks with you somehow. And it's nice to experience it and say, this could be what maybe like, and some people I know go places. I think we actually have it in Best of the World. There's an essay on Costa Rica where, a woman went to Costa Rica and then never wanted to leave because that way of life for her family just worked better, And so sometimes it sticks with you in small ways and sometimes big ways that you just change your life entirely because of one experience. And I think that's the beauty of travel is what you take away from it could be life-changing.
Yeah. What were some of the other destinations in here that you wanted to highlight? I love the breakdown. We talked about the list last year, and then, of course, this is much bigger than last year's list, but the nature, culture, cities, adventure, and family covers it all pretty much.
Yeah. The one that I loved personally that kept popping up, we actually feature it 4 times in the book, but rightfully so in my opinion, and it's great for U.S. travelers, is the state of Utah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually
So
a
underrated.
it's so underrated. It's like it has everything, especially for families. And so, we featured it 4 times, once for adventure travel, once for Montage Deer Lodge as one of the best of the world hotels. We have a whole road trip through southern Utah where you go through a bunch of state and national parks, and then Zion National Park is in there. I've done all these experiences, and I still feel like there's so much of Utah to see. There's just such a diversity of what you can do there. And like I said, I'm a go traveler. I grew up, we were adrenaline junkies in my family. My kids are the same way now. So we go to Utah to ski, but we also, like, my favorite time of year out there is that cusp between summer, fall. And we go mountain biking, we go fly fishing, we go to the national parks, we do waterfall hikes, and there's so much to see and do there. And I think it's this underrated gem that people maybe think about for skiing, but nothing beyond that. And there's so much to see and do there. It's a big state. And there's so much to do nearby too. When I was younger, we actually did a road trip from Nevada through Utah up to Salt Lake City, and we hit a bunch of national parks. We did a lot on the way there. We went horseback riding in Bryce Canyon. And so I truly think for U.S. travelers looking for a domestic best of the world destination, like, find a spot in Utah and head there, because you will find something to do.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's so diverse, and there's so you can have it really a bit of everything. Okay, I know this isn't a magic wand, it's just a pen, but let's say I can, like, point it at you, and we got some, like, dust swirling in the air, and all of a sudden your book's glowing. You got your best of the world copy here, and you can open it up to any page, and you can put your finger on it, and it will take you there. Where are you going? What is the number one experience or destination in this book that you have not visited, but you would most like to do? It's not a fair question, I realize.
It's not.
But, it's you not. In the moment right now, whatever, early morning, it's a Monday as we're recording this, and you're just like, you know what? I can go spend the day here today.
Mm-hmm. I would say right now that the top of my bucket list is the Azores in Portugal. It has been, since working on this book, I keep saying to my husband, so when are we going to go to Portugal? It is just, it's been described a few times to me as like Hawaii, but Portugal. But I think it's so much more than that. From what I've read about it, it's, there's 9 different islands. They're all very diverse from each other. The entry in Best of the World is all about how it's example of sustainability actually working, that the islands all collectively put sustainability first. So their coral reefs are healthy, their forest lands are healthy. And I want to go to a place that truly can tout that can say, we've protected this land, we've made it biodiverse and kept it biodiverse. And see that nature for myself. I've also heard the culture and the food is amazing. I want to go scuba diving there. The lodges look beautiful. It looks like paradise to me every time I see pictures of it. So that is definitely at the top of my list.
Love it. You're only increasing my own personal list. So thank you for that. The spots that didn't make it in the book, but almost did, I'm just curious if a couple come to mind. I know they're not in the book, but I'm just wondering if there were a couple on the bubble that were like, oh, darn, if we had 1001, this would have been there.
Yeah. I would say we covered a lot. One that, we kept going back and forth for sure, was kind of a Thailand road trip that we have in there. And that's something I've done myself. We did Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and then the beaches area. And so we do have Thailand in there for the Yingping Lantern Festival, which I do think is something everyone should get a chance to see. It's beautiful. But it wasn't that it's not best of the world. It was a space issue more, but also we wanted to have a diversity of hidden gems mixed with the expected. And I think, for a while, Thailand and Chiang Mai and Bangkok in particular were so well known. It became trendy for a while to go there that it kind of got pushed for more hidden gems throughout the book, I would say. But it's one that I definitely had a hard time letting go of because I did have such an amazing experience in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai in particular that it is a part of the world I want everyone to see and experience. But it just was, it felt like something, we have a lot of well-known destinations in here too, but it felt that there were some more surprises that we could put into the mix. And so that's kind of why it got pushed a little to the side.
Since you were in Chiang Mai, sort of separate question from the content of the book, but how do you feel about, you were there, that it's sort of a digital nomad hotspot, let's say, a lot of remote work, people congregating, becoming like a bit of a bubble. It could be in that way if you're putting yourself in that bubble, if you want to call it that, depending on your attitude and how much you're involved in the local community when you're there or not. No judgment here. I'm just, an observation. I'm just curious what you think, the remote work movement and the digital nomad movement, those associated movements where people can now spend extended periods of time in other countries. How do you think that's impacting the local communities? The good, bad, and ugly. Have you guys discussed some of those types of topics in your office? And
we do talk about it. The good is it's, allowing people to really truly immerse themselves in a local culture. Obviously, the bad is how much is that digital nomad experience shifting the local culture? How much is it westernizing places that might not have been westernized so soon? How much impact are the remote workers having on the place they're going versus what I think should be the opposite, that the place is having an impact on them? And so I think, I'm all for people going abroad and living somewhere new. But I always hope that they do it through the lens of because they value and appreciate the place they're going to and that local culture rather than wanting to change that. And, when we were in Chiang Mai, we did see a lot of expat communities, but it didn't feel like it had totally changed the culture of Chiang Mai itself. There were pockets that felt more Americanized, I would say, or European. But there was still a lot of authentic culture there. So I think it's that balance, of like, you want people to live in the place they feel the most comfortable or where they want to be exposed to, but you also don't want to change what makes that place so special and making everything homogenous and European or American, by having these larger expat communities. And I think, and this is the most obvious sense of it, and it's been going on for decades. It's not because of remote work, but like you can see it in places. We published The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner, which is all about the places in the world where people live longest. The westernization of places. So Okinawa, Japan, for instance, was a blue zone for years, and people lived well into their hundreds. And now what Dan Buettner has discovered is, hey, because of military bases, McDonald's and all these other, KFC, all these fast food chains showed up in Okinawa. And now their population, the younger generation, isn't going to live as long as the centenarians that he had met in Okinawa that he founded the Blue Zones on. And so I think you have to keep that in mind when you go to places and you want to live there is what are you bringing in and how are you respecting that culture and keep safeguarding that culture? And not to say that all westernization is bad. There are good parts of it too. Access to the internet, access to other things, pumping the economy, all of that is great. But I do think there's that careful balance that we need to be aware of not just changing a culture outright because of an influx of expats.
Yeah. Appreciate your thoughts on that. There's no, it's a complicated issue, right? You might talk to one local saying, well, this is great. I have more income from my family. Another person might be like, they're driving up the prices. This is ruining my life. It's complicated. So it's just kind of curious about your thoughts there. One of the things that was advanced over when we were talking about chatting was this idea of you providing some tips for less experienced travelers on how to plan it for a trip of a lifetime, which I'm just going to use the caveat here because this is a Zero Travel podcast. We want people to fill their lives with as much travel as possible. I remember going on a trip thinking this is like a one-time thing. I'm never going to get to travel across the US like this again. And then I did it for the next 10 years, So I think it's a good, like if you haven't done, let's call it a quote unquote trip of the lifetime, whatever you want to say that is for you, it can definitely be the gateway to lots of trips for you feel like you live many lifetimes in a way. Yeah. How would you just define like a trip of a lifetime? I guess it would be maybe something that's perhaps a bigger investment, something you've always wanted to do that you've been putting off that you're ready to do now, something like that. Would that be the mindset?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a great way to define it it's that place you've always wanted to get to. I think for newbie travelers, start with something that's not your trip of a lifetime to get your travel legs under you. If there are people who've never been on a plane before, don't make that your trip of a lifetime, your first plane ride necessarily, because you might have anxieties and things about riding in a plane that you want to kind of like nip in the bud before you go. And like, don't let that ruin your experience if you have nerves about flying or going on a boat or something like that. But to plan the trip of a lifetime, start saving as soon as you can. And it could just be like, cut out your daily Starbucks to kind of get that budget going for your trip of lifetime, and do your research. What I like to say about Best of the World and books we do like it's aspirational and inspirational. This isn't necessarily your guidebook to everything and anything to do in these destinations. These are bucket list destinations you should try to get to. These are trips of a lifetime. And so it's a starting point. It's an entry point. You say, hey, this is the place I want to go. And then do your research. Talk to travelers who have been there or people who live there. There's a lot of networks online. Facebook, for instance, has travel groups that you can literally just search in Facebook and say like Costa Rica travel group. And you can ask people for their advice, their opinions on what to do, where to go. Guidebooks, of course, are always great, but figure out what your like 3 goals of this trip of a lifetime are. Is it you want to see all the sites in a place? Because that takes a lot of legwork. If you're going to Rome and you want to see all of the ruins and the Vatican and all of that, like, what does your day look like to get you to all of those sites every day? How much time do you need? Or is your goal to just eat the best food? And if that's the case, are you eating the best food because you're going to Michelin star restaurants? Or are you eating the best food because you're going to awesome street vendors at a night market in Thailand? So figuring out what that looks like. Or is your ultimate goal a beautiful family experience and you just want to go to a place and get lost in it? So figuring out what your goal for that trip of a lifetime is, because it is more than just choosing a destination. The destination is your starting point, but there's so much to do wherever you go, and you're not going to get it all in a week. If that's all you have is a week, I promise you're not going to see everything you want to see or everything that this place has to offer. So what are the key things you want to see, and gear your trip around those key things and figure it out with that frame in mind. And then I do like to say, like, I know it's hard to think about, especially it's hard budget wise and everything. You can go back. If it's a trip of a lifetime and you loved it and you're like, hey, but I didn't get to do X, then come home and start planning to get back there in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it takes, because these places aren't going anywhere. So you don't have to feel that insane pressure of seeing and doing everything while you're there. And I have that pressure every time I go somewhere. I'm like, I might never get back here. I have to do everything that I possibly can. And then I like don't sleep the entire time because I'm cramming it all in. But that can take away from your enjoyment because you're just stressed and running. You have 2 seconds in one place and 2 seconds in another. So try to curate the trip for maximum enjoyment on top of just seeing everything that you want to see there.
There's that word curate again, right?
Yes.
Love
Theme
it.
of the day.
Yes. Is there a destination in here that you do think on the flip side of that, not that we're not trying to create travel anxiety here, but one of those destinations where you're like, this one, it would be good to get there sooner than later because it is getting really popular and it's just on the cusp of exploding, but we can still have those more authentic experiences, less crowds. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, and I would say Croatia is one of those destinations that's a beautiful place to see, but it's really blowing up. Game of Thrones did not help ease that travel burden. So I think that that's the first place that comes to mind. It is one of those places that I fear will become like a Venice or a Rome or a Paris of that. Dubrovnik. I'm trying to think of Iceland is another destination that, people have been, pushed to go there and see, and it's becoming very over touristed right now. And so I wouldn't say don't go there. I would just say, they're exploding right now. There's a lot of tourism happening in these areas, but one of my favorite tips to tell people is go in the shoulder seasons, and you're going to avoid that over tourism. And it might not be the pictures you saw of the place because it's not the season that everyone goes and takes those pictures. But you're going to have a less crowded experience, which often makes for less travel anxiety when you're not with a horde of tourists in this area traveling around. One of my favorite pictures is actually a place that's on my bucket list is Katmai in Alaska, which is where the grizzly bears are. And so National Park Service actually just finished up their Fat Bear Week, which is a competition where people vote on their favorite fat grizzly bear in Katmai National Park after they've feasted on salmon to prepare for hibernation. But it's on my bucket list to get to. But I time and time again think of this National Geographic photograph by Joel Sartori, I think it is. He was in Katmai taking pictures of the grizzly bear hunting for salmon in the river, which we've all seen that beautiful picture of, the bear with the salmon like jumping in his mouth. Joel Sartori turned the camera around from the bears to the decks, the observation decks, and took a picture of all of the tourists there taking pictures of the grizzly bears. And it's just a reminder of the other side of these beautiful places, that there are people and crowds and tourists there. And you have to be mindful of that when you go, that's just part of the experience is these crowds. And you can either go with the flow and be there among the crowds and deal with that, or like I said, choose a different time of the year to go that's less popular and you're going to have less crowded places.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What is the biggest perk working for National Geographic?
I would say that I get to travel from my desk every day. I get to see different places through the lens of our writers and photographers. I get to meet people regularly who I think are changing the world, making it a better place, and are really passionate about what they do. I'm a very, very little cog in that wheel. So I'm just grateful to be part of it and to be working with these people that are truly out there doing the hard work of protecting our oceans, our wildlife, our planet, and allowing us a window into places around the world that we may or may not get to in our lifetime. And I feel very blessed to be part of that organization and to be working with those amazing people that are out there in the field.
Amazing. Now, let's say hypothetically there was a travel podcaster who wanted to pitch a book idea to you. How would they go about doing that?
So my email is always open for pitches. And what I always say to people when they're pitching, start by sending me just a paragraph of what that is. So I can say right direction, wrong direction, let's talk. And then from there, if it's an idea we want to consider, we create what's called a book proposal, which is a more in-depth overview of what this book would be, how it's organized, what it covers. And so anyone can email me pitches. And we take pitches at all times. We're not like open and closed at certain times, but I think always start with, here's a short version, here's my elevator pitch. And then we build from there after a few discussions.
Thanks for that. Okay, because, if my audience, I think, would kill me, there'd be a subset of people listening right now that'd be like, you didn't ask Allyson how we can pitch her a book idea? Okay. I have a few ideas maybe, but, I'll get my elevator pitch together.
There you go.
Do you have any exciting book projects planned for the coming year or? trips?
We have a
Yeah.
lot in the works. We in this coming February, we have a book with the Bucket List family, who are a family of, they call themselves travel journalists. They're online on Instagram. They post weekly YouTube videos of their travels around the world. So Jessica G of the Bucket List family actually wrote her tips and tricks. It's great for families, how to travel as a family with kids, from surviving jet lag to tantrums in an airport, and then 50 great itineraries to do with families. So I think for anyone interested in family travel, that's a great one. And then we have some really fun kind of guidebooks more along the best of the world. We have a great book coming out in April called Here Not There, which is all about just what we were talking about, places that get over tourist, overcrowded, kind of overpriced because they've been visited so often. This is a whole book of if you've been to this place or you're thinking about going to this place, but you're worried about that over tourism, here's an alternative where you're going to get a very similar vibe and flavor. So it's 100 alternate destinations to kind of more typical destinations around the world, which is a really fun, different play on travel. That was really fun to work on.
Sweet. Where's your next trip? Even if it's local, what do you got going on?
I'm actually going back to Utah
Nice.
to go skiing this winter.
Where are you going to go?
We are going to go ski out in the Park City area, Alta, Snowbird, Canyons, all of that.
Epic.
So we're looking forward to it. Yeah.
You can always get a good powder day out there, I feel.
Yes, always. So we're excited. My 5-year-old will be skiing. It's his second winter on skis. So we're excited to see if he gets the hang of it.
Yes, I'm in that boat with my daughter. This will be her, second year kind of doing the downhill thing. So it should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite adjective?
Oh, eccentric.
Nice. Do you have a favorite quote recently that you've been leaning on?
I'm not going to quote it correctly, but there is a quote by Mr. Rogers about looking to the people, the helpers, that I lean on a lot. And it's all about looking to the people in hard times that are helping, that are doing the good work to remind you of all the good in the world. And that is one of my favorite quotes, but I don't have it memorized.
Yeah, that's great. The as you mentioned, the intention behind this book, aspirational, inspirational. You said it best when you said one of your biggest perks as the senior editor of National Geographic is getting to travel from your desk. And if you get the best of the world 1,000 destinations of the lifetime, then you can have the same perk.
Yes.
Right?
Armchair travel at its finest.
Right. Not even behind your desk. You can have it on your couch. That's what I've been doing, sitting on my couch reading this. And I appreciate, thank you for sending me the book. And I just wanted to say thanks for your time. And also thanks for the inspiration. You know, even as a traveler, I'm not traveling as much now with kids, but I mean, I think whether you're traveling a lot or maybe you're in a stage in life where you're not traveling as much, it is going back to what we talked about at the top, like just reading about the world and learning about new destinations and some of the nuances of them. I feel like it just makes me grateful for all there is to do in the world and excited for more explorations whenever they come. And the book has been fuel for inspiration. Absolutely. So thank you. Thanks for taking all the time to put it together. I mean, what a team here. I see there's a lot of people involved in this too. So
there are, yes.
So kudos.
Well, I hope it inspires travel. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to kind of leave people with, or?
You know, I just hope this book is inspiration, whether it's just paging through for the beautiful photography and storytelling or inspires your next trip. And it really is a beautiful collection that celebrates our entire world. And I hope people enjoy it and they can buy it wherever books are sold.
Thank you. Total honor to have you here. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
There you have it. I want to thank Allyson Johnson for taking her time to be on the show. I know she's very busy over there at National Geographic. And yes, in a moment, I am going to share a handful of destinations that I've added to my bucket list since getting this book, and also A few that I have been to that are in the book that I would strongly recommend if you're looking for more destination fodder. It's coming up in a minute. We're also going to leave you with a quote that perhaps sums up this week here at the Zero to Travel podcast. Upgrade your bucket list week, which is a fun theme, I would say. And I hope you're going to enjoy it. We've got more episodes coming, 2 more this week. As I mentioned in an earlier episode, we are publishing 3 episodes a week through the remainder of the year. So if you're not subscribed or you're not following the podcast wherever you listen, go ahead and do that so you don't miss the next episode. Yeah, I won't spoil it, but just keep an eye out on the feed. You're going to enjoy these next couple. Okay, before I let you go, let me share with you this quick list of 10 destinations. I've got 5 that I've added to my own bucket list, and then I have 5 that I've been to that I thought I would just highlight from the book. Okay, number 1, there was a section called Foodie Cities, and they listed Rome. It's obvious, I know, it's popular, but you know what? It's an incredible experience to go and eat Italian food in Rome. If you've done it, you know. So that's on the list. I would recommend it. Dublin was another one. They called it the world's cheeriest city, quote unquote, here in the Best of the World book. And it is a very infectious place. The Irish are just infectious. Their love of music and dance and crack, aka the slang for just conversations and talking. And it seems like you can make a friend anywhere. Whether you're in Dublin alone or with a group, can't go wrong. Okay. Third one, they had a section about climbing the Rockies in Colorado. I used to live in Colorado, and I will just throw a quick recommendation. I wanted to climb a 14er, one of the 14,000-foot peaks back in the day, and the easiest one to climb, or I should say one of the easiest, is Quandary Peak. It's close to Denver and Breckenridge, so you can get there pretty easily, and it's a nice, gentle walk up to the summit. So it was a cool thing to do, to say, hey, I want to climb a 14er, find one that wasn't so extreme, and get that done. But any climb you do in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, your soul is just going to be filled with, fresh air and nature and beauty. And there's something about hiking out in Colorado I'll just forever hold close to my heart. Still miss it to this day. So get out there and climb some of the Rockies if you can. Okay. The fourth one, even though we did talk about it in the interview, but I'm giving it another stamp of approval. Utah, the ultimate adventure playground. There's so much to see and do in Utah. Shout out to Utah. If you haven't been, just go and drive around Utah and have adventures. I've been to Moab multiple times. I've been mountain biking, hiking in Utah, skiing. It is a wonderful place to explore. There are cities to see, culture, and that way it's a great place to visit. Okay, and lastly, they had a section called Meet the Maya in Guatemala with a picture of Tikal, one of the ancient ruins there, where you go and you feel like Indiana Jones visiting an ancient ruin. Just a beautiful place to go and visit and see. Lovely country. So there's 5. Just wanted to highlight those because, again, it's Upgrade Your Bucket List week. So might as well throw a few more at you. And not that you care, but I'll share 5 that got me excited in the book. First of all, there was this Paris to Sea bike path, 270 miles, La Seine au Velo. That sounds pretty cool. That was one I added. Georgia, been on the bucket list for a while, but I'm upgrading it, so I'm moving it back on. New Zealand, they call it the capital of adventure here in this book, and another place I really wanted to go to visit. South Korea, which also comes up later this week, as you'll hear in a future episode. Mentioned in the book a couple different times at least, and it seems like a very compelling place to visit with the food. You can see all of the wonderful art and culture, music coming out of South Korea. Just a place I'd really love to go. So I'm bumping it up on the old bucket list. And lastly, they had me at this headline, an epic walk to remember. In England, they said, quote, a colossal undertaking is nearing fruition. When unveiled in its entirety, the England Coast Path will be the world's largest seafront walking trail, stretching nearly 2,800 miles. Wow. Okay. So yeah, if you think about that, you have one of the smaller nations in the world creating the longest seafront walking trail. And it sounds like a very interesting walk. I mean, who doesn't love walking on a coastal path along the ocean and then stretch that out for 2,800 miles? I'm sure you're passing through some quaint villages, and it just sounds pretty epic. So anyway, just a little taste, a little bit more fodder for your own list as we close this out with a quote from, let's see. Oh, I misplaced it. Hold on. Here it is. Tilopa. Who are these people that have just one word for their name? I know Madonna, Prince, Banksy, Bjork, Pink, Nas. Okay. But in regular life, do people have one name too? Is that something you could do? Anyway, if it is something you can do, and I was going to do it, I have no idea what name I would pick. That's a lot of pressure. Anyway, I'll come back to you on that. For now, let me leave you with this quote from Tilopa, who said, "Have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing." End quote. This whole like non-attachment thing, I don't know, it can be difficult. There are a lot of things I am attached to in this world, but I wanted to relate this back to destinations as we close it out. Being open to new destinations and not attached to any one particular one is a fun way to go through at least this destinations week, I think, and a fun way to approach your travels, and it can actually be in a more affordable way if you're really open and you can stretch your budget and you find that some places are more affordable than others at this moment in time, then go for those. So have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. Applied to destinations, something to think about. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com.